Hi, everyone. My name is Pam. Welcome to His Purpose Prevails. As you can see, today we have another special guest. This is Samantha Lee, but before I allow her to introduce herself, I just kind of want to talk about this podcast in the name. So, the name of this podcast is His Purpose Prevails, which is derived from scripture in the Bible that says in Proverbs 19:21, many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. So, how this kind of came together for me is I think I just wear so many hats as a mental health therapist, as a Hmong woman, as a mother, as a sister. And so this kind of integrates all parts of me. I also identify as Christian. And so this is just a great way to be able to talk about any topics that fall under that umbrella. But I am so excited to have Samantha Lee on today. And she and I kind of met through social media. We knew a person in common. And this person was sharing some of Samantha Lee's posts. If you haven't seen her posts, you are missing out. So get on that. But something you said stood out to me that kind of set you apart from all of the other fitness coaches out there. And you had talked about something that I never heard before. And I'm just going to paraphrase because I don't have the exact, I was trying to research, but I couldn't find that exact post because it was years ago. But you had said something along the lines of the different calorie counting apps like MyFitnessPal and all the other ones, they're not really culturally inclusive, right? Like they're not really set for the Hmong diet. And I had struggled with that, but nobody named it and nobody said it verbally. So I had kind of thought well, how am I going to, Chinese mustard greens or oyster sauce? Like how do we I gotta do all that work to find out how many calories. And so that really stood out during that time. I think I was also working on internalized racism and there was a lot of things happening. But I know I was struggling with wait a minute. So we can have a diet that's more inclusive or more within our culture. So yeah, that was mind blowing. And then I shared your post and then I shared it to this professional women's group of people of color, of women of color. And then I shared it to them because I was like, this is mind blowing to me. Have any of you heard this? So that was what drew me in. And then listening to your podcast and shorts, it has just been so motivational to me. So enough of that. I just want to again welcome you to the podcast and please share a little bit about yourself.
Oh my gosh, Pam, I appreciate you. I mean, I just remember hopping on the call with you and us chatting, and I'm so glad to see where you are today because it's just so exciting. You've come such a long way from our conversation, if you
Mhm.
remember. And I'm just really grateful for that. So, hi everyone. Y'all can call me Sam. My former name is Samantha Lee, but a little bit about me. So, I have been in my weight loss health journey for the past 11 years now, as of 2024. And the reason why I got into the work that I do now is because back then, when I first started back in 2013, that's when Instagram just kind of started. But everything that you saw in terms of fitness, you would have to Google or you have to YouTube videos. But I remember at the time, I was just so frustrated because if you're not familiar with my journey, I've done all of the diets. I've done keto, intermittent fasting, apple cider vinegar, Whole30. I've done, those wraps that you wrap around you and you put a little
Yep.
I don't know, is it like a balm? And it's supposed to melt your fat, but it's actually not true at all. So I've just done all the things. And I remember feeling so frustrated because at the time I was going to go off to college and I would come home sometimes and my mom would cook for me. And I didn't want to eat her food because I was like, well, I'm trying to stay on track with my weight loss journey. Like, I can't just be eating Asian food because also during this time, there was a lot of noise around how Asian food is not healthy. There's a lot of MSG and there's just a lot of comments around how this is the right way to eat
Mhm.
healthy versus this way.
Right.
And I remember just going on YouTube trying to figure out okay, how can I do this? But no one was really showing me how to eat my Asian food. And I
Mhm.
think what I was really disappointed that when I would see a woman of color share their journey, because at the time I follow a lot of Gymshark athletes,
Mhm.
and I was disappointed at how they would show what I eat in a day, but they would eat quinoa and kale and chicken breast. And I'm like, but that's not
Right.
how I eat. And so I was like, you know what? Let me just do this. Let me just figure this out. And at this time, I already knew a lot about nutrition because I tracked calories for 3 to 4 years, like consistently. And so I really understand nutrition from that aspect. And I just apply that knowledge to like my mom food.
Mhm.
And that really helped me like open up this door. And then when I started eating my cultural foods, a lot of my friends and family would be like, "How did you do this? Like, tell me more about it." And so that's how like the journey started. But it was a rough patch at the beginning. So
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime we've thought about like dieting, it's been okay, we have to cut out rice, we have to cut out noodles, we can only eat lean meats. And you're right, when we go to, because I think a lot of Hmong people where we do family gatherings and a lot of that bonding is around food. And so, yeah, it's a bummer. I remember trying to diet during Thanksgiving, and my mom, the way that she shows her love is feeding us. And so when you don't eat her food, it's almost like a disrespect, or she feels hurt, and I'm not trying to hurt her feelings, so thank you so much for sharing your journey, and I can tell you're super passionate about this, and we'll get more into that. But yeah, you reminded me that you and I had a Zoom call, and that was because I was wanting support. I was wanting that like one-on-one coaching. So after I had learned about that, I reached out because that was mind-blowing. And you actually, we decided at that point that I wasn't necessarily ready for coaching. So I can, I like being transparent. I can share a little bit about me, but you and I, because I'm a mental health therapist, I see that weight is not the same for everyone. The reason why people hold weight, the reason why people gain weight and lose weight, like it's different for every single person. For example, if someone's depressed, like for me, I would probably eat because I'm an emotional eater. But for other people, if they're depressed, they lose weight, they stop eating. And so it's so different. And I remember you and I, some of the things we talked about was like food insecurity. And so for me, um, my mom, she started going to work and my dad didn't cook. And so then like we would have the whole day and just not eating, right? And so I remember getting married and like there being an abundance of food. And then when there wasn't, like my in-laws, they would like hide like the ramen noodles in their room and it would be all gone. And so I just had the mentality of like, I need to eat all that I can now for reserve in the event that I don't have food, right? And then you and I, we also discussed, so for me, like some of the sexual abuse that happened, I think I was sharing with you, like for me, the extra weight is almost like a barrier and security because it's like in my mind, when I was sexually assaulted, it was because I was like skinnier and maybe more attractive. And so it's almost like if you look better, you're almost a target for a sexual assault, which I'm still working through that, but it's almost like this fear of being like skinnier or slimmer or more attractive. I kind of hold on to that extra weight as like protection, like I want to feel good and I want to look good, but not too good to the point where I might be a target. And so I think in our talk, and you can talk more about it too, but I think you had said, like, I think right now for you, it's really important for you to go to therapy or meet with like a therapist around food. So feel free to elaborate on that too.
yeah, yeah. No, thank you for sharing because you're bringing up like I definitely remember that conversation. And this is this kind of brings me to the direction of like what's the difference between like therapy and coaching, right? And how do I know when someone needs X or Y therapy or
Right.
coaching when they come and talk to me? And the way I would describe this is if you need help with processing deep emotions from past traumas or past experiences that are from your childhood, therapy is a really good tool for that, for you to talk it out, for you to unpack and really understand like the root of why you are the way you are and really
Right.
help you understand your brain at that level. Now, when it comes to coaching, coaching is all about like getting you to the goal, right? Like,
Mhm.
let's say if you've been having like a weight loss goal for a long time, but you're not executing on it consistently and you need that accountability. You need someone to really help you unpack like the mindset that's causing you to hold yourself back.
Mhm.
Coaching is good for that. And I will say, as someone who has gone to therapy, and
Mhm.
also like I'm currently still in therapy right now, and I also do
Mhm.
coaching at the same time. I have my own coach. I also think that it comes down to personal preference, right?
Mhm.
Like I feel like sometimes talk therapy doesn't work for everybody. For someone who is maybe needing more somatic work, right? Needing to
Mhm.
really move emotions through the body. And so I think it's really all about understanding what's the proper healing technique for you.
Mhm.
And once you understand like the difference, it does make it easier for you to make a decision, right?
Mhm.
But like being on both sides of it too, uh, I prefer one or the other for different timings in my life. There's no right or
Yeah.
wrong tool for sure. But I always say that, like what you were mentioning about, like the visibility and being seen with like a skinnier body or just like a fitter body because of your sexual abuse history
Mhm.
or just like your food scarcity, like those are all things that needs to be accounted for, especially when it comes to inclusivity in the fitness and health industry, right? Because
Mhm.
this is why like a cookie cutter program doesn't work for everybody. Like you can't just tell someone to go keto when maybe they haven't had access to carbs for like their entire childhood, right? Or
Right.
it's even thinking about like not understanding that the sexual abuse is things that needs to be processed in order
Mhm.
for being safe to feel like visible and seen again. And that's why I was like, I remember at the time I was like, like if you want to do therapy and coaching, that is the best combo, right?
Yes.
But if
Mhm.
you only are able to have access to one or the other, like it's all about understanding yourself. Like, have you unpacked your past experiences, your childhood traumas? Is your anxiety stemming from those things? Are those emotions like your experiences, right? And then keeping that in mind. And if you have done therapy, then try coaching. And I've
Mhm.
had some clients that they've done coaching and then they literally uncover like, oh, I want to go to therapy for once for this particular thing in my relationship. That is also
Sure.
like a beautiful way too. So there's not a right or
Mhm.
wrong thing, but I just want to like clear the air of like the difference between therapy and coaching because I think
Yes.
there is such a big difference between the two and there is also similarities, but it's also
Mhm.
understanding like the scope of practice. And so that's my thing. It's like whenever someone comes and talk to me, I'm like, it's right for you and it's not, and I'll let you go and do your thing. And I think that
Yeah.
just stems from us being in integrity with our work for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for explaining that. And I want to say I really appreciated that about you because it's not like you're just doing it for the money or whatever. Like you really assess. And I like your motivational, I don't know if it's like motivational interviewing, but you had this technique where you wanted to know like where we were. And I think that helps you to gauge if it's appropriate. But I really appreciated you. I have to admit, I was a little disappointed, not in you, but it was just like, oh, wait, this isn't going to be as easy as coaching and counting calories or, you
Yeah.
know. So then I was disappointed because I'm like, oh man, I gotta go do this work. So thank you so much for like being transparent and just being like, yeah, I don't think this is the right time, or if you want to do that first or do it with it. Like you gave a variety of options, but I think at that moment that's what I needed to hear. And I
Yeah.
had to think about it like, yeah, and there's so many layers to the food too, because it's like our relationship with food, eating food for comfort. It's kind of like an addiction, I would say, because a lot of people who struggle with smoking, they'll say like, well, that's what's always there for me. Like when I'm sad, it's like my friend. And I think food can kind of become that too, where, yeah, if I'm sad, it's there. If I'm happy, it's there. If I'm bored, it's there. And so we eat our feelings, which is why it is important to get therapy and to be able to process those feelings.
For sure. And I just also want to add to like the emotional eating aspect of it too, because it's such a huge thing in the Hmong community, but also as women of color, right? Especially if you come from marginalized communities, you
Mhm.
experience food scarcity similar to Pam, right? And I also remember too, like when my mom would go to work, my dad would always buy us McDonald's. So like
Yeah.
now whenever I think of McDonald's, I'm like, oh my God, it's when my mom used to go to work and my dad didn't know how to cook. So he
Yeah.
would just buy us fast food all the time. And so living
Hmm.
off fast food was pretty much like majority of my childhood, right? So
Yeah.
I think like it's important to just know where you come from. And the way I like to approach this is like when you're changing your relationship with food,
Hmm.
it's all about changing the narratives, right? But what I have find is like if you haven't processed your emotions,
Hmm.
um it's hard to change that narrative. And so this is like going back to like therapy or
Hmm.
coaching, and that is the work that I do with my clients where it's like if we have done all the mindset work, if we have
Hmm.
done like all of the Like you have the strategy, you have the plan of like exactly what you need to do, and you can't get yourself to do it. Like it's
Mhm.
deeper than that. And I know at the time you didn't want that answer, but I want to say it out
Yeah.
here for whoever's listening. It's like if you have been struggling with your weight and you think that your body's broken, you think that like there's something wrong with you because you can't figure it out, like
Mm-hmm.
stop listening to the people that you're following on social media that's making it as simple as it's just a calorie deficit, or you're
Right.
not counting calories, or you're not working out enough. Like it's so much deeper than just working out and like the nutrition aspect of things. It's like the emotional side of things and like really understanding
Right.
what your background is. And I think that's important. It's not a bad thing that is so much deeper. I just think like if you understand that about yourself, you'll have a better experience, and you'll direct yourself to the right healing technique.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so good. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about that too, but I was talking with my doctor and we talk about weight and things like that, and I was borderline diabetic. And so for me, I'm starting to understand that like what we eat impacts people differently. And so for me, if I eat an orange, like my glucose levels or blood sugar spike. But if someone else eats an orange, it's totally fine. And so I was saying to her, I was almost lamenting because I was like, okay, so you can eat as much rice, pasta, carbs as you want, and it has no effect. But if I eat it, like I understand we're not in Laos, and so we don't need all those carbs to turn into energy. But if I eat it, it's almost like it's not good for me. And so I was almost like coveting and envious that she could eat carbs and nothing would happen. But she kind of flipped the switch and she was like, well, actually, she said something along the lines, and I don't remember, but something along the lines of like, if we both did not have enough food, like you would outlive me. And so then it reframed it for me because I was like, oh, here I am, lamenting and feeling bad that I can't eat carbs, but it's just different for everybody. And I think understanding that and not having a blanket statement of like, and then shaming, like body shaming too, I think that's really important. So if you want to touch more about that.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why I always say, like a lot of the clients that I work with, they're always very scared to go to the doctors because if you grew up with family that doesn't go to doctors, like if your parents didn't go to doctors because,
Yeah.
they're scared of like medication,
Hmm.
or if you just didn't have a good experience, I totally understand. Like what I'm trying to refer back to is like sometimes getting your physical annual exam done and like getting your blood work result can be very, it's like this very anxious experience because you're like
Hmm.
waiting on whether or not you have a health problem,
Yeah.
and you're just like waiting for the results to come back and really compare it from last year, right? And kind of see how you do.
Hmm.
And one thing that I always tell my clients is like you cannot use those data like against you. Like you went
Hmm.
there to check to get your health evaluated, right? But just to get more data on how you can pivot.
Hmm.
And some of the clients that I have help with, like they like if they have high blood pressure, it's like how can we like how can you understand how like the foods that you're eating right now affects the high blood pressure, but also like what are some fun foods that you can incorporate that has low sodium, right?
Hmm.
And I think now there's just so many low sodium option, like low sodium soy sauce, and you can literally make papaya in a really unique way, like papaya
Hmm.
salad without
Yeah.
using all of the fish sauce, right? There's also low sodium fish sauce. And there's so
Right.
many ways to like add more flavor into the papaya with different herbs instead of just using all of the shrimp paste, right? So
Hmm.
I'm just thinking about like that as an example, and then kind of referring back to you about like about your experience about being pre-diabetic. It's like some of the clients that their A1C is like getting close to there, and
Hmm.
it's about like working with your food. And so I never want anyone to like have like a result that they don't want from their blood work and then use that against them. And from a
Hmm.
pre-diabetic perspective, it's like it's not that you can't have carbs. It's just that you have to prioritize carbs differently. And so
Yeah.
for the some of the clients that I've worked with, it's like maybe it's like prioritizing, like really making sure that their plate is filled with protein and veggies, and they're gonna eat that
Hmm.
first before they eat the carbs,
Right.
right? And then helping them understand like how to stabilize their blood sugar and not like eating something like not eating like a pastry in the morning that's going to like
Hmm.
spike up their blood sugar, and then
Yeah.
having them to like manage it later. And it's like
Hmm.
understanding how the certain types of foods like what are the macros in them? And if you don't know what macros are, it's like, what are the carbs, protein, and fats that
Mhm.
are in the foods that you're eating right now? And then how can you like work with those foods on your plate to get the best bang
Mhm.
for your buck? I think a lot of time for the clients that I have worked with that have a higher A1C,
Mhm.
they stay full longer because
Mhm.
they're prioritizing protein so much and they're
Yeah.
trying to get veggies in that it's like,
Uh-huh.
oh, this is amazing. I also want to share my experience about like a couple years ago. So high cholesterol actually runs in my family. And so
Mhm.
that is a number that I'm always like looking at every time I go. And then
Yeah.
I remember going to this visit and mine was like borderline. And I'm
Okay.
like, oh, like this is interesting. I had
Mhm.
to process my emotion of like, oh, really like now I have to do something about this, right?
Yeah.
But I remember like going back again the next year and having it go down back to normal.
Mm.
And I was trying to reverse engineer like how did that happen? What did
Mhm.
I do exactly? And I think having this health conversation is really important because I think when you go to the doctors, they're like, here's your results, just do this, and you're just like what, but I'm really grateful that I have the nutrition knowledge because I was able to take like, okay, high cholesterol, I know exactly what I need to do with my food. And I just
Yeah.
remember like spending more time doing cardio and like just getting my heart pumping so much better because I was so used to strength training at the time that I
Mhm.
didn't have enough, I didn't balance it with endurance. And so I added
Mhm.
endurance, and then I also started eating less red meat. Like it's not like I'm saying I can't eat
Mm.
red meat, but I'm like I'm just not gonna have it like every other day. Like I'm just probably gonna have it once or twice a week. And then I
Sure.
mainly ate like chicken, ground turkey.
Mhm.
And then if I ate pork, it would be like lean pork. And I didn't like restrict anything from my diet. I just made
Mhm.
these like little adjustments and that changed my cholesterol score. And it's normal. So I think like just understanding what you're eating is very important, especially
Mhm.
for like Hmong food. I mean, I know like when you go buy mustard greens at like Tala Chapo, right? You're not gonna
Uh-huh.
know the calories in it. But if it's like
Yeah.
veggies and fruits, it's completely fine. Like don't overthink it, but I'm talking
Mhm.
about like the things that you're buying at the store where you can literally read the nutrition facts. Like if you're eating ramen noodles, look at the
Right.
nutrition facts. If you're eating
Mhm.
like pork belly, look at the nutrition facts, right? Like look at everything that you're eating, not from an obsessive place, but like educating yourself on what you're putting into your body.
Mhm. Yeah, I just wanted to share. So diabetes runs in my family too. And I had gestational diabetes with my kids. But how did your family manage the cholesterol? Because I feel like my mom never really managed her diabetes. The takeaway I would say with her having diabetes is we didn't have a lot of fruit juice or like any type of juice or pop or soda in the house. And so I never really grew up having a taste for that. And so even now, like water's my go-to. Sometimes I'll crave orange juice, but generally like I'm not drinking a whole lot of juices. So that's good for me because with the diabetes, but I didn't like my mom, she didn't know how to manage diabetes other than taking medication. And then it's almost like we didn't learn that. So I'm just wondering, like, if your family managed cholesterol, maybe that you got tips, and if they didn't, it was almost like you were learning yourself how to manage that.
Yeah, so I'm on my parents all the time. And so like they actually go to the gym and they actually walk every day.
Okay.
And but then prior to this, let me just kind of reverse back to like 2013. They
Mm-hmm.
used to not be health fanatics people, okay? I got them transitioned to eating brown rice. And so it
Oh.
was like me implementing. I think a lot of time as a woman of color, we want to change the habits of our parents because we care about them. But I
Mm-hmm.
always say like the work starts with you. Like if you're not eating healthy, if you are not educated on nutrition, and if you
Mm-hmm.
don't put yourself in the journey, you can't really help them, right? And because of that, like I will always tell my parents, like, try brown rice, like just try it. I know you don't like it, but just try it. And then now my mom eats oatmeal, and I'm like, girl, that's perfectly fine. She loves it. She prefers it more
Yeah.
than rice. And so I think it's just like introducing them to like new foods and not making it like you have to eat this for your health, but also kind of like just try it. Like just try it and see if you like it. Don't judge it. And and then like when back then, because I was like under 18 when I first got my gym membership, I had to be under my parents. And so
Uh-huh.
that actually encouraged them to go because in order for me to work out, they had to go. and they would
Yeah.
just go on the treadmill. And so like when I started building that consistency, they saw that, right?
Mhm.
And every time they will get their annual checkup, like I will have a conversation with them and I'll be like, oh,
Mhm.
how did it go? And really like helping them like navigate the health conversations with their doctors.
Yeah.
But like a lot of these, like, so my parents have managed their blood pressure and their cholesterol to this day. Like
Mhm.
they're really healthy.
Mhm.
But it's like an upkeep, right? Like they always have to keep doing it. Like I think the hardest thing for my parents is like the winter time when they can't go
Mhm.
outside and they have to rely a
Yeah.
little bit more on the gym. And when we were in COVID, like during the pandemic, when we were like shut down, like I would do like home workouts with them. And so I think it's just
Mhm.
like really like educating them on how important it is because if you think about it, like our great grandparents, our ancestors, they gardened. So they had like
Mhm.
something to like be active about, but now
Right.
it's hard, right?
Mhm.
So I just think about it like the way I have helped them is just me keep showing up and then me just checking out on them. I think that's like the most simple way.
Yeah. I love that. So you were motivating them. Like it was you that kind of got them on this health journey.
Yeah, and I always like complain to them. I'm like, if you guys want to live long and see your grandkids, you guys gotta stay healthy. Like I let
Right.
them see like the bigger picture of things. And
Mhm.
I think like it's easier done than said because I know not everybody has a good relationship with their parents. And I know some parents are really like stubborn. Like I've coached clients where
Mhm.
they're like, I want my dad to be healthy, but then he doesn't want to do these things. And I
Right.
think at the end of the day, like what you could do is just show up for
Mhm.
yourself, right? Take care of yourself, encourage them, but like
Mhm.
at at the end of the day, like it's also you can't put like their health in your control
Mhm.
because they're the one that's making the decision for themselves. And what I always like to encourage is like what's in your control, and your control is to educate them, is to spend time with them, is
Yeah.
to really like help them understand the bigger picture, but it's not to change them. And I
Right.
think like it took a while for my parents to get on board. Like I think they didn't even get on board until after I was finished with college. But
Mhm.
like I think as they're getting older, they're like, oh, like it's making sense. And I think you just have to keep saying the same thing over and over and over, especially for my own parents. What I've noticed.
Yeah. I love that. So I want to circle back because two of the takeaways that I heard you say is one, like I think we gotta stop things cold turkey or we feel deprived. But you're saying like even with the counting calories or the carbs or even like certain things that we shouldn't eat, you're saying you can have it, but maybe like in moderation, or you can have carbs but have, lean meats and vegetables first. So I really appreciate that. Small changes are still helpful. So I tell my clients that too, like, hey, if you tweak like your communication with your partner, that can go a long way. Or if you just do this instead or try this, like those things can go a long way. So it's like building those healthy habits.
Yeah, and I would also add like moderation looks different for everybody.
Hmm.
Like I have a client that moderation for her is eating donuts 3 times a week. Another
Hmm.
person is like moderation is like I only eat it once a week. I don't even eat
Yeah.
donuts on a weekly basis. It's only when I go to the mall. So I think
Hmm.
like understanding that when someone says eat in moderation, like don't look at what they're doing and trying to eat like them. It's like
Hmm.
how does your body genuinely feel when you have donuts?
Yeah.
And then like based off of like that data, decide how often you want to have it. And then as
Yeah.
you're in that process, it's important for you to start introducing yourself to new foods. Kind of like what I was
Mhm.
saying to like my parents. I didn't tell them y'all can't eat white rice. I'm just like, can you guys
Yeah.
just try brown rice? Can we just try
Yeah.
oatmeal? And then like when you go to like events, like Hmong events, like
Hmm.
Tolo'ono, it's like
Hmm.
they bring like pork and like beef home, right? And
Yeah.
like those are not the best healthy options because they're full of unhealthy fats.
Yeah.
And I remember telling my mom, you don't always have to cook like the napa cabbage, like 该好啊, with
Yeah.
just pork belly all the time, or with this particular part of the pig. You could
Uh-huh.
just literally, we could do that with pork chops at the store that's leaner. And I would just
Yeah.
like share these things with her and she'll
Hmm.
like be open to it. But it's not like I never said you can't have this. And I think that's important because the moment when you tell someone they can't do something, I think our brain just like freaks out. I don't know, you as a
Uh-huh.
therapist, all of a sudden it's like, I can't do it. I'm gonna make myself do it now. It's like when you tell someone to quit smoking or quit drinking, they're like they actually go on a binge.
Uh-huh. Yeah. No, that's so important. I also wanted to bring up something. I don't know if you've heard or read or done research, but like, have you heard that people of color have higher rates of certain things like heart disease, diabetes, and I know that some of the articles I've read, it's correlated to like trauma and things like that. But like, what are your thoughts and what have you read about that?
I there was an article that I was reading about like Hmong people specifically on how
Uh-huh.
stroke rates are higher and heart diseases. I don't remember the source, but it's there somewhere. If you Google it, it's there. And
Yeah.
then, yes, there is a lot of research done, even like in the Black communities, right? Like
Hmm.
obesity rates and just like heart diseases, like those things are it's just in it's it's really common in marginalized community. And of
Right.
course, it is also created, I mean, it's created from trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you really think about it, like from if you look at it weight loss from a fat phobic standpoint, it
Mm-hmm.
started back then with like Black people and
Mm-hmm.
like how overweight, is that's
Yeah.
the stem of it. It's like those things. So
Mm-hmm.
I like there is a ton of research on it and I have definitely looked into it for sure. And I do think there's a lot that goes in about it. Like it's like trauma, like the language barriers, systematic
Mm-hmm.
racism, right? And also like experiences. I think I remember like not my parents were never really scared of the doctors, but like my
Hmm.
grandparents were. Like, my grandparents here in the United States,
Yeah.
they're like, oh, I don't want to go because they're just gonna give me medication. And sometimes they'll get medication, they don't want to take it because they're like, oh, the doctor is just trying to poison me. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, like you need to
Mhm.
get your like blood pressure under control. Like the medication is like a temporary fix to
Right.
get it under control. And then it's like about healthy habits from there. But I think
Hmm.
we're just really missing a big piece, which is educating our elders,
Hmm.
and educating them that like it's safe to go to the doctors. But also, as we're having this conversation, right? I
Hmm.
also want to keep in mind that health accessibility looks different for everybody.
It
And so
does.
that's also like a conversation. Like this topic could be, it's like a spider web. Like we could like talk about it in so many
We
different
could.
ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like keeping in mind that the reason why people are experiencing health issue is not just because of the fact that they don't want to go. It's like their skin color, their background, their traumas, also the system is made for
Hmm.
us. And just giving yourself a lot of grace and compassion. Like I've had clients that come to me and they're like, oh, I've never gone to the doctors. And it's
Hmm.
like, yeah, don't feel shame about it.
Hmm.
Like if no one taught you to go and also you don't trust your doctors, like
Hmm.
it's so valid. And so I think like just validating people of color experiences and just recognizing that it's not as easy as just go to the doctors and get your blood work done.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I know even like the indigenous populations or Native Americans, they have higher rates of obesity and like heart disease and diabetes too. So there is definitely a trauma correlation. But yeah, even for therapy, I always tell people, especially those that are presenting with depression symptoms, I'm always like, go to the doctor, get your labs done because sometimes if you have a thyroid issue or there are certain medical conditions that some of the symptoms are like depression too. And so for me, I'm always like, and we talk through that if there's fear or anything like that, we talk through that. But I think it's important to have a starting point to know where you are because I always tell them, even if it's not related to, health and diet, it's like if you don't know that there's an issue, then you don't know, you'll never address it because you never know there's an issue. And so, yeah, it's so important. I always say, at least get an annual visit.
Yeah, and I think like it also starts with having like a safe space, right? For you to hold those emotions where like if you feel uncomfortable going to the doctors because of your
Mhm.
past experiences, or maybe you're just scared because your parents didn't have good experiences, I think
Yeah.
like not gaslighting yourself that
Yeah.
you should not feel this way because you're in a different generation now. And of course, like I'm pretty sure you as a therapist, you guys have done so much like training on how like trauma isn't just past, it's like in our DNA in some way, right? Like
Epigenetics. Yeah.
yeah, and it's also
Mhm.
like we have to like understand that it's just so much of a bigger picture. And I think when we kind of see it from a holistic view, you really like recognize it. And I always say, I'd rather know the answer than not know and
Right.
not be able to do something about it.
Yeah.
Even if knowing the answer feels scary. Like I was literally talking to my best friend a couple months ago, and she was like scared to go to the doctors because she's scared of like what her results are gonna be like. And I'm
They don't
like,
want to know. Yeah.
yeah. And it's like that tells me that you need to have a support system where you are allowed to process your emotions depending on what that look like. And this is why community is so important to us women, and like being in spaces where even if you're talking to a therapist or someone close to you, it could be just your husband too, right? Like just sharing things with them or your friends.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's nothing to shame about. Like, I think I just wish that like blood work conversation was more common. Like, I could be like, hey, how
Yeah.
was your blood pressure this year? Or like, how's your cholesterol? I
Yeah.
just wish it was so common.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not. And I think like being able to just create a space where you can have those conversations is important because I always tell every single client and also like my friend is like, even if you go and the result isn't what you want it to be, at least you
Mm-hmm.
have the next step to figure it
Mm-hmm.
out versus like figuring it out like 20 years from now and it's something that you can't reverse.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, I want to switch the topic slightly to like greetings because I remember being in elementary school and my uncle came over and he was like, "Why are you so fat?" Like that was a greeting. It wasn't like, "How are you?" It was like, "Oh, you're fat now." And so that's happened like on my dad's side. And then my in-laws do that now too. It's like their greeting. They'll say like, "Oh my gosh, you're so fat now." Or like, "Oh, hey, you look good. You're skinny." Or, "Hey, you lost some weight." And it's like, why does that have to be our greetings? But then, my youngest, she's a little bit heavier. And so I notice that she is taking on shame and there are things too. And so I have said to my in-laws, like, can you guys not greet my children that way? Because it's harmful. Like, or if you want to talk about weight and it's really a concern, why don't you say like, "Oh, hey, how's your health? I'm really concerned." Or in a nice way rather than like, "Hey, you're fat now," or "Hey, you're." Do you get that a lot? And do you hear about that in the monk
Oh, I
community?
hear it all the time.
Yeah.
If I go back to like my journey at 2013, the reason why I went through that rabbit hole was because my mom has always commented on my body. Till the day, she still does. It doesn't bother me anymore. Like I remember,
Yeah.
on New Year last year, she was like
Hmm.
measuring my clothes, and she's like, "You can't be bigger than me. Like your size is going up there." And I'm like, "Chill, mom. I'm just getting more muscular." But it's just like
Uh-huh.
it's a common conversation that
Hmm.
happens in different cultures. I feel like, and especially in Asian culture, Hmong culture,
Hmm.
specifically because that's our background. Like we just have an idea of what our body should look like, right? Like, and
Hmm.
I think how I have come to terms of not letting those comments affect me
Hmm.
is really doing the work of like understanding my body, but
Yeah.
also understanding what I really want. And
Hmm.
I'm sharing this with you all because a lot of times you set weight loss goal because you're trying to prove a point. Like you're trying
Mm.
to prove to like your in-laws or you're trying to prove in some sort of way that like,
Yeah.
you're not overweight and that like you can get skinny and all of that. And you're just coming from this place of hating yourself, but also like trying to
Hmm.
prove a point. And I think
Hmm.
when you're losing weight in that way, it's easy to be in the diets. It's easy to
Mm.
like try the shortcuts and the quick fixes. But what I have find is that they're like when you take care of your body, like if you're exercising consistently and you are actually eating good for your body,
Hmm.
someone can comment on your body and it would not bother you because you know you're doing something about it. And so I
Mm.
always find that like if you are not taking care of your health, the comments tends to be more like you tend to take the comment a little bit more harder than you would
Mhm.
if you were to take care of your body. And I always say that like I've come to terms with the fact that I'm never going to satisfy my mom. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of us we have to recognize that we can't change our parents' voices
Mhm.
about what they think our body should look like, but also
Mhm.
it's bigger than this, right? Like they learned
Yeah.
that fat phobia culture through somewhere else.
Right.
And like their parents probably talk to them in that way and all of these things. And so I
Mm-hmm.
always try to understand myself about that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do I feel? Why am I triggered about this comment? What can I
Mm-hmm.
do about it? And then when I can give myself compassion, it's easier for me to have compassion for my parents. But it's
Yeah.
don't skip the compassion. Don't try to like understand your parents if you don't understand yourself, because I feel like that's like the hardest part for sure.
Mhm. That's so good. Yeah. Because, for me, Um, I'm one of those where I carried like my size 3 high school skinny jeans. It was literally baggage that I was carrying because everywhere I moved, I would hold on to those in hopes that I would eventually fit that. And then I just got to a point where it's like, why? Why am I doing this? Like, it's okay if I don't fit those jeans, but every one of us we've had like a body journey, right? Whether we've loved our body or we didn't. But I don't know if you remember, there was like a documentary that came out. There was this woman, I think she was from like the UK, and she was like into I don't know what they call it, but like she was I think a bodybuilder where she was like she was miserable and then she thought like if I finally get to be this size then I'll be happy. But even like she was so strict and everything and she entered like a competition, but even after that, she said she still did not feel happy. And so she went around the world and she started like this body positivity movement or whatever. But as I was listening to their stories, like it made me think why I was not thankful for my body because I thought, man, I have 3 girls. If I heard them talking about their bodies the way am talking about mine, like it would hurt me because as a mother, like we think our children are perfect. Like we love all of their roles, we love every part of them. And so for me, I was like, I'm gonna feel so disappointed if I ever hear my daughter pick apart her body because in my eyes it's beautiful. And then I started to have appreciation and gratitude toward my own body. And I was like almost having this internal monologue with my body. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you let me have 3 children. Like you are like my vehicle. I get to hug my kids, I get to smell flowers, and I'm like, and like some of the stuff I did to you. Like it was my poor choices that made you. And so I just kind of had like this peace with my body. And I started finding more gratitude for this body. And so I think like that was one of the turning points in like accepting myself the way that I am, knowing that I can change things, like things that are changeable, right? Like if I don't have an hourglass figure, I should stop hoping for one. But I feel like just accepting myself for where it is right now. And then, knowing that if I want to make changes, then I can make changes.
I love that. And you just brought something up in my brain, like in my brain just had like a light bulb moment.
Yeah.
And it's all about like looking at the bigger vision, right? Like I know like receiving these comments from your family is not easy, but
Mm-hmm.
I will say one thing that has helped me is just preparing for them. Like I know that if I go visit my parents, they gonna talk. Like they just gonna
Yeah.
talk. It's fine. But I think
Yeah.
like me preparing that has helped me deal with it better. And so I think sometimes we get caught up in the comments because we wish that they could change the way they think about our bodies or like our children's
Mm-hmm.
bodies, but like that's not going to happen, right? Because they
Mm-hmm.
have to do their own work. And a lot of times
Yeah.
our parents like they're not aware enough to like also see that. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think like just preparing yourself that that is what's going to happen, but
Mm-hmm.
also the second thing is like you you have to like do this work for just more than losing weight. And like similar to you, like I don't have any kids, so I can't relate to that. But
Mm-hmm.
I know for sure I want to be a mom. And I know like the work that I do now is gonna help me have those conversations when I
Yeah.
have a girl, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
like I think about like just a deeper vision of okay, like if I'm dieting right now and like I bring this and I see my future daughter see me stepping on the scale every fucking day, like they're gonna be
Mm-hmm.
like, what does that number mean? And so like I've always been
Yeah.
like a futuristic person and I think that has helped me really understand like, oh, if I want to have kids someday, which I do, like I do have to start shifting. Like I do have to think
Mm-hmm.
differently about my body image and my food and I can't bring on this generational culture of like calling your kids fat all the time, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
work starts with you and like
Right.
As annoying as that is, like it's the truth. Like you
Yeah.
can't I always say you can't protect, like one thing I've noticed, I'm not a mom, right? So I can't relate to that. But what I
Hmm.
will say is like I have nieces and nephews. And the thing is like I can't protect them if I don't know how to protect myself.
Hmm.
Meaning like if I don't know how to navigate the fat conversation, I'm not going to know how to navigate the fat conversation with them.
Right.
And so it always comes back to like, why do you want to lose weight?
Hmm.
And is your reasons from a place of you? Like, did it
Mm.
come from you or did it stem from trauma? Did it stem from your mom? Did it
Right.
stem from like comments that you had growing up? It's really
Hmm.
understanding like what your true intentions are. And I often find when you know your true intentions, it's like, it's so easy to be motivated.
Yeah, no, that's so good. I'm glad you said motivated because that's going to be my last question for you is I think people, there's so many levels of motivation. And for me, like I still feel like I'm not there. Like I've done a lot of deep emotional healing, but I still feel like I'm not there where I have the right mindset and the right motives to start working on like getting healthier, right? Or losing weight. Because I think I'm to the point where I do love and accept myself for who I am, but I know that there are changes that I want to make. I just am not in the right mindset to make those changes. And so, people they're gonna have different levels of motivation. What would you say to somebody who's feeling like slightly motivated? They're on the fence, but they're like not totally there.
Yeah, I would say, and motivation comes up so much. So I love this
Yeah.
topic. Expect that you're not always going to be motivated. Like, motivation is not
Mhm.
supposed to be there all the time.
Mhm.
And I think when you tell yourself, oh, I'm not motivated, of course, you're
Mhm.
not going to be motivated. Like, you're not supposed to be motivated. I think just validating that you're not going to be motivated is a really big step. And
Mhm.
this is why, like, building habits is so important because
Mm.
you can only rely on your habits when you don't have motivation. And if you don't have habits, then when you're
Mm.
not motivated, you're not executing anything that's related to your health. And so I always say like I always tell every single client, instead of focusing on I'm not motivated or like I'm not motivated enough to do this work or I don't feel motivated today. I'm like
Mhm.
shift that focus to am I building habits?
Ah.
Are you like asking yourself that every day? Like, am I building habits instead of I don't have motivation? How do I get it? It's like, do I have the habit? Like, am I building habits? If I'm not, how can I build one today? And I think like
Mm.
just that simple shift is really important because I think a lot of times when you're stuck in this rut of like, I know what I need to do for my health, but I'm not doing it, it's because you're
Mhm.
trying to solve the equation for motivation. And there's no
Yeah.
equation. Like, I'm sorry for those of you who are listening to this, but like, you're not gonna be motivated.
Yeah.
It's just the honest truth. And like,
Mhm.
if you keep staying in that, you're gonna be where you are, which is not where you want to be, right? And so
Mhm.
instead of like solving that, like I'd rather just have you shift your focus to like, am I building habits? Because your
Right.
habits are the things that have your back when
Mhm.
you want to do the hard things. Like I'm just thinking about, I recently just got back from a month trip. I traveled
Mhm.
to South Korea, Taiwan, and Japan, and
Wow.
and it was such an amazing time because I didn't have access to a gym. I ate whatever I wanted. And then when I came back, I still maintained my weight.
Mm.
And one, like, I'm going to talk about this more on my podcast, but one of the things
Mhm.
that helped me do that was me having the habits of eating 3 meals a day. Like, I didn't
Oh.
go on this trip skipping meals, right? And I
Mm.
didn't go on this trip relying on people like, hey, like, are you guys hungry yet? And it's like, no, what are we eating for lunch, guys? Because we're not skipping lunch before we go on our excursions.
Uh-huh.
And then I also like walking became a habit because like I've always like made walking like a habit. And so
Uh-huh.
making getting my steps in for this trip was important. And so
Mm.
like I want you to think about like how even just walking and even just like not skipping lunch
Mhm.
like those go a long way on the days when you have to go on a trip, on the days when you don't feel like working out, right? Like,
Sure.
and you are just not feeling motivated to cook. Guess what? You can still eat takeout and have your 3 meals in, and that's perfectly
Mhm.
fine. And
Mhm.
so I always like to say, like, it's like the unsexy thing, but I think everybody needs to hear it. It's like the
Mhm.
boring, like, let me get good at these habits versus let me wait until I find that like spark of motivation because it's not gonna come. And as you get older, it's harder. Like meaning
Mm.
because you're getting more busy, right? Like you
Yeah.
are gonna have kids if you want kids. You're gonna be invited to so many more events. Your family, your friends are getting married. You're traveling,
Mhm.
and it's just like you're never gonna have the time to really be like, how can I motivate myself? Like that's the wrong question to ask yourself.
So when we focus on motivation, we are focusing on the wrong thing. But you're saying we should build habits. And the two habits that you built that sustained you on your trip was making sure you eat 3 meals and then making sure that you're getting your steps in. So walking.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Like that
Yeah.
was like super helpful, and I think like past me would have been like, "What? So you only eat 3 meals a day and walked?" Because she's like, that's not enough. But it's like that's the problem. It's like we think
Mm-hmm.
that we need to do enough to see results, but we don't.
Mm-hmm.
We just need to like keep doing the same thing over and over and over every day and making sure that thing is easy to do
Yeah.
so that we can keep doing it. And then eventually it just becomes a part of you.
Yeah, because you have that to fall back on. So I like that you say that because if we're just relying on motivation, motivation is not secure, right? We don't because we can't always fall back on that because we're not always going to feel motivated. But if you have developed these habits or routine of walking, drinking water, eating 3 meals, then you can fall back on that because you know that it's comfortable. It's kind of like your default.
Yeah. Like the thing is
Yeah.
like if you focus on changing your default, kind of like you said,
Uh-huh.
that is going to serve you more than I don't have motivation though. Like I'm gonna wait until I have motivation. Like the way I think about it is like you spending energy on trying to get motivation is the same amount of energy that you're gonna put in to change the default patterns that you have right
Yeah.
now. It's like the same
Yeah.
energy, but you just get different result from it.
Yeah. Makes sense. Okay, Samantha, you and I are gonna need to have a part two because that just opened up like there's like so much more that I want to talk about, but I know our time is running out. Again, I want to thank you so much for your time. I know your time is very valuable. You have clients
Thank
and
you.
people, leaning on you and wanting to hear from you. So thank you so much. This was so good.
Thank you. And I just want to share how y'all can find me. So I'm pretty sure Pam would just share all of my links in her podcast, but I'm mostly active on Instagram and Facebook. So if you go to www.instagram.com/superlysam, that's super Ly Sam. That's also www.facebook.com/superlysam. And then if you want any, like if you have any questions about like how to work with me and like just about me in general, just visit my website, www.superlysam.com. And then listen to the podcast. I also have a podcast. It's called Your Winning Journey. And I have an episode released every Wednesday, and I walk you through like the mindset that you need to have, and also healing your relationship with food and exercise without dieting,
Mhm.
and especially like incorporating like that culture piece, because that's really important to me. Like I am approaching weight loss from an anti-racist lens, and that's always something that I've been really passionate about. And so if that resonates with you, come and just listen in. I always feel like we're like talking to each other when I'm on there. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and hopefully we'll be connected again soon.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Pam.
Thanks.